Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today, we're going to do a fast and loose tonalist watercolor landscape painting on a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua. 100% cotton, 140-pound cold press. I just coated it with water. We'll jump into it. Today, I want to play around with just raw sienna and lamp black. Gonna paint in the fast and loose and let the scene create itself, but I am going to focus more on just compositional effects and elements as we get started. The past 2 days I played around with kind of a full earth palette and lamp black, which led to the idea of playing around with individual pigments along with the black. So that's the main goal and focus. And with these videos, starting to have fun with the titles, just putting kind of ridiculous names like artist refuses to use black, blue. I think that this one might be bad boy watercolor artist breaks all the rules and uses black. Just kind of those funny, cringy titles within a painting. Anywho, that being said, just having fun. It's the end of 2022. It's the Friday the 30th, and I'll have time to get one or two more paintings in, and whether they'll be up on YouTube by then I'm not sure, but we'll see. And I hope you all have a happy new year and stay safe and get tons of painting in. As with all my videos, you're always welcome to follow along. You're always welcome to sign your own name to anything you do whenever you follow along. And you have my express permission to sell anything you do when you follow along. I want you guys to be successful, to have money for art supplies, and to continue having fun. If you want to support this channel, I have the Patreon down below. And you can like, subscribe, follow. I'm also on the path to trying to get 8,000 subscribers. And thank you to everybody that subscribes and everybody that donates. I really appreciate it. It helps with art supplies and buying new materials. I really wanted to start this exploration off with yellow ochre and the lamp black, as I think yellow ochre and either lamp black or ivory black, bone black, is the basis of it's one half of the Zorn palette. It's used for the yellow, the black is used kind of a replacement for blue, and the mixture of two gives you a greenish hue. But I never really used that much yellow ochre, so I don't have a big supply of tubes of yellow ochre. So I wanted to start with raw sienna. That being said, I just finished a tube of DaVinci brand raw sienna. So that's what I'm using right now. Actually, I'm using, and the lamp black is wherever I put it. I think I put it in the bag. I think it's DaVinci brand as well. The reason I mention the brands, and the reason that part of it probably doesn't matter, is that if we are staying within kind of a earth palette, the pigments made amongst the brand, the raw sienna, the burnt sienna, the raw umber, etc., are supposedly kind of made in relationship to each other. Or that's a general theory, it seems like, from handprint.com. But since I'm just playing with a black and a raw sienna, it shouldn't matter. I'm going to use this to map out my scene. Think we'll have our waterway. We'll do the landmass here. Speaking of black, there's quite a few different, amongst the different brands themselves, quite a few different blacks on the palettes. And I think part of them are where and how they're manufactured. Where lamp black, I believe, is carbon black. And then they have the ivory black, which is bone black, I believe, which is made from bone ash, I believe. But then you could have Mars black, which I think is a laboratory setting whenever they have the Mars in the title, like Mars raw sienna or yellow ochre. It's the synthetic rather than being pulled from the ground. I think the benefit of that is that there's consistency from batch to batch, while something made from natural pigments probably has slight variations. And this is kind of just random speculation on what I'm trying to remember while I paint this out. What else is important? And then beyond that, you could probably find blacks that granulate, black that is a mixture of multiple pigments, i.e. McCracken black, which I have, and that's from Daniel Smith. Very interesting black that was designed to, I don't know if it was to mimic the black of the Dutch oil painters or Dutch, what is it? Somewhere around the 1600s, I think. They have the information on danielsmith.com. You can find granulating blacks. You can find probably more opaque blacks if you want to look at your gouache. You know, just have fun and explore. Anyway, to continue with that, the rambling about black, it often makes its way onto a palette through mixtures in student level and actually, you know, other level paints with Payne's gray, I think sometimes sepia, and what are some other ones? It might show up in an indigo, etc. And they're often mixed with a blue or a brown, and there. I believe black watercolor, black pigment, was of course part of the master palettes in oil painting. I'm sure it was there in the beginning with watercolor. Handprint.com does have a classical palette that it suggests. I'll have to look and see if it suggests a black on it, but I'll take a look. That's something we can approach down the line, since a lot of this channel is just palette exploration and different experimentation. A lot of experimentation. I think we could add some interest in this sky. Unfortunately, this is going to soften and lighten up as it dries. So we're going to have a tonal shift. And it's something that we have to be wary of. And the blacks are notorious for having that tonal shift. Just if you're working with Payne's gray, if you're working with your darker pigments, you'll have that happen. So just be wary, and this is part of the exploration, to see how the tonal values are going to come about. Black, I believe, finds its way onto modern palettes through like sets. where you might buy a Cotman or a Van Gogh set or a pan set, and they'll usually have Chinese white and I think a black on there. White is often considered a no-no in watercolor painting, and from what I've understood, and I'm referencing handprint a lot in this video, is that when the golden age of watercolor was coming about, it was essentially mimicking the look of oil paints, and people wanted to kind of distinguish between the two, and there was critics out there, and the critics were saying whether pure watercolor or not included white. I'm sure at this point, and I've never entered a competition or anything like that, but I'm sure some competitions have rules on whether you can use white or not. I think it dates back to just the Victorian era, and everybody started painting, everybody started creating the hobby, and people just trying to form titles and I think gatekeep in a sense. If you don't like white on the palette, that's fine. I mean, I don't have it on my palette, but it's just for those of you out there that might be reading never use white or never use black. Explore them. The black is often left off the palette or said to have been advised against because it muddies and mutes the color, it dulls the color. But I like the muddy muted effect. That's literally something that I'm going for in my paintings. So I enjoy that. Another thing is that if somebody's teaching painting, a teacher, a professor, or an online painter or whatever might advise against black or not want their students to use black on the palette. And it might not be because of the muddying of the color. It may be because the professor, the teacher, wants their students to learn how to mix darks from the given colors rather than just adding black to it. I often reference when I was learning oil painting when I first started in college. I was taking the life drawing and painting classes when we were doing the still lives. I think one of my very first classes for oil painting, and I played around on the side prior to that class. I had 4 tubes. Alizarin crimson, ultramarine, most likely a cadmium yellow hue, and white. But anyway, I had more of a bigger palette based on what the professor recommended. And I think I was painting a table or a cloth, something coming towards me, and I was adding white to it to lighten it as it came closer. And the professor, Mr. Semerjeff, Chris Semerjeff, had said, use other mixtures to try to get it to come closer to you in the picture plane. So, things like that are learning experiences, learning how to use pigments and exploration. So with this, we used a little bit of the paper towel. We really haven't added too much texture to anything. I really like the softness of it. These two colors work fantastic together. My main concern is this. I mentioned it earlier when I was dabbing some of the black out of here. Places like this, as we get the tonal drying shift, dry very splotchy. And whenever I do a dry off, if there's anything where I anticipate that happening, I'll kind of point them out, and then I'll do the dry off, and then we'll see what happens there. We are still like really in the wet and wet phase. This is a great time to push some pigment around, create some textures, add some ideas. With scraping, I always try to mention this in every video. You can get a few different scrapes to happen. You have a sharp edge, which will damage the paper and will backfill. So if you want dark marks that'll last, for example, if we had little pieces of, I don't know the different type of grass, but the little grass that grows up and has little seed pods, maybe the ryegrass, is that what it's called? We can make those marks and just go about it in a way where you have fun, you have a varying positions for it, and you have areas of density, areas where you're lacking the density, and it just gives a rhythm and a randomness and a pattern, just a flow throughout. I often prevent myself from using this scrape in a background because this scrape will stay dark and things will lighten around it, and the tonal contrast between the two is a little too much for my enjoyment. For example, I could scrape out all the branches here with this sharp edge, and if I dry it, it'll then soften quite a bit, and it'll, for me, it stands out differently. It's just not what I prefer. Something we can explore, even though we know that that's something that I don't like, because it's just frankly worth exploring the things that you don't like to see if you can adjust it to what you like. That being said, our other scraping is the flat wide edge, which I was using in this fashion. And whenever I do that, I direct the pigment, the water underneath, so it naturally starts to ground whatever shape I'm scraping. You could see when I pulled out this spot, my harsh scrapes still taking place there over that. So you can get a grounding happening. You could also do that on the water if you wanted to. The round edge, if depending where you're at in the drying process, in the levels of moisture, you can get that to scrape or not. It's not ready yet. I could hit it lightly with a blow dryer and get it to a point where it's scrapable, but it's something to watch out for. And that's just learning just the different moisture levels. The back of this fingernail is similar to that mark, and I have a tool made by a Mr. Mark that I use for that mark as well, as well as wide strokes. He messaged me, left a comment that he has made some ends for brushes, and he wants to make some more tools and maybe do some sort of raffle giveaway through this channel. So if you're interested in any handmade tools for free, just mention the comments down below and we'll see if we can get that to happen, because I'd love for you guys to experiment with it, and I really enjoy the different scraping tools. He sent me two. I have another one that has this bend in it. I think it's in one of the bags because I had taken it on a trip. And of course we can use the paper towel for texture as well. Maybe a little interior foliage texture, just lighten some spots. All right, so you can see how soft and frankly how wet everything is still. I'm going to pause the camera. I'm going to do kind of a half dry so you can see the next scrape, and then we will dry completely after that. The blow dryer itself will have different levels of usage with how high you hold it, how close you hold it, and with the rate you want it to dry at. I still have some wet spots, and I did that so that I can now show you how we can scrape back to the white. So with these scrapes, we can create the dark marks and we can create these light marks. And I found that that's been really, really helpful whenever we're looking for a variety of tonal values and we're using a limited palette. I'm going to, rather than continue the dry off, while I was doing the dry off, I thought, oh, we can do some wet and wet trees. Here's something I haven't mentioned in a while. If you're painting wet and wet, you can increase the pigment load to prevent the cauliflowering and the back runs. I don't recall where I had seen it, but I do remember either an artist or somebody in video just saying, to put it frankly, if you just reduce the water on the brush, you won't get those backfills. I have some areas that are a little dry, so I'm just taking advantage of this stage. We'll scrape some whites out a little bit more in a moment. But with the #1 rigger, or anything at this stage, with this application, it'll soften quite a bit. It'll give some interest. Now, what I'm keeping in mind here is just essentially like a linear perspective, and as we recede into the picture plane, the proportion of the height of objects, height compared to the height of marks here, this white area, these ones are closer together. And if I was to bring these marks closer to us, you can increase that gap, and they're just going to get closer as they recede back. I've done videos on that. I think it's about time I redo those type of videos, or I just reshare them. If you take a look at the, I guess, the about page on this page on my YouTube, you'll see that there's just a lot of videos. I pretty much film everything that I paint or experiment with. There's so much different texture you can get from the Hake brush. We still haven't done our full dry off. I'm pulling things in a little closer Reason being, this is a quarter sheet, 11 by 15. If this was to be matted, the mat would come to about here. And I'm just thinking of the cropped image. And how much will be missing. Let's throw some black in there. We never did a complete dry off, which needs to happen soon. Not for any reason other than to hopefully show you guys the tonal shift. Whenever you paint over those scrapes that are white, it'll backfill and create the darks. But it gives us a good variety. All right, let's do one last. Mark making. All right, I'm gonna do a pause. We'll do a dry off and we'll see how everything looks. I had said that I would point out areas that I think will dry splotchy. This area we'll watch for. All right, so you can see that we had the tonal shift. It lightened as it dried. It became softer and kind of duller. You can see the splotchiness of those darker applications of the black there. That's what I had pointed out, anticipating that happening. Here, when I went in with the hake, after we had scraped and played around, the hake was wetter than the surface, so that's why we got these textured cauliflower shapes. It's not something I usually seek out, but as you can see, it's pretty easy to achieve if we have to, if we want to rely on that. Okay, gonna get a little bit of water on the hake and mix up some raw sienna and lamp black. In this application, especially when I'm working with just one tube or two tubes, it's very easy for me to get a very same tone or same value and lose variety. So I'm trying to apply the pigment in such a fashion that we get that textured effect. And I have the paper towel ready so that I can lift and blotch, and that I'll move some areas darker, some areas lighter. We could also play around with adding a little bit more water to the brush, though I really don't like having that much water on the brush at this stage. So you can play around with those aspects. This as well is going to dry lighter. You want to be prepared for whatever you're using. In yesterday's complete earth palette and lamp black exploration, found that we had to go very heavy with the lamp black in order to get our darkest darks. Also talked about a term known as bronzing, an effect where you're simply just applying too much of the paint, and it dries in a fashion that looks shiny or leathery. Well, frowned upon, I personally think it's not too much of a big deal, and I think the effect is lost anyway when the glass is placed over a painting. Let's grab some black. We're just using the hake brush here and just letting just some of the hairs touch the paper. I think we can bring some heavy application and then really play around on top of this with either the number 1 or the number 4 rigger. I grabbed the number 4 simply because it carries more pigment. The palette and everything is pretty dry. Let's pull this. All right, switching to the number 1 for just thinner lines because I see myself just playing with branches now. These will soften as well. It's just a matter of me at this point just knowing that this black, I'm not sure how it would be with other blacks. We need to explore those. That with this one, it's going to dry softer than it is. And unless I pull it straight from the tube, I'm not going to get that dark. And you can see risky mark making right here earlier is now dried to a more softer effect. And for me, a lot of it is experimentation and just moving from one pigment to the next and seeing from one video to the next what's happening, or potentially taking that one pigment, continuing to use it, but adding something else to it. You might find, and that's just the way I paint, the way I like to explore, but you might find that you're like, okay, I really like burnt umber, and then you learn the intricacies of the burnt umber, and that's what you use. I don't want to use the word settle with, because that kind of has like a negative effect to it, but where I don't even want to say like you resign yourself to use that. It's just you make that your color. I think Van Gogh, assigned himself sunflower painter with his flower, with what he painted. I was talking about Charles Warren Eaton yesterday, how he's known the painter of the pine tree painter. So what you enjoy, whether it's painting in all blue, sepia, in bright cheery colors, you're going to find what works for you and what you want to do. And if there's any pigments, any tubes, any brands you'd like me to play around with, let me know. If you want to shoot me a super thanks, like a donation, I can take that money and purchase those tubes if I don't already have them. The recent purchases have been the water-soluble oil paints, and we've been exploring that in a video series that I'm just slowly releasing, just because YouTube doesn't like if you post a million things in one day. And I think I have some other stuff lined up, so let me know. And of course, I'll do what I can. Let's do one last dry off and see if there's anything we want to change. All right, during the blow drying dry off, I just thought to myself that I'm very pleased with this color combination, the raw sienna and lamp black. It works very, very well. It gives me the browns that I absolutely love. We can go from the whitest white, just the white of the paper, to some really dark darks. And if we were to continue, we're about 38 minutes in this, so I'm going to stop the video in a moment. We can continue to build up that dark and have just a huge range of tonal values. We do get something that gives the hint of a brownish green, and we have our yellow. Oddly enough, it almost gives a kind of blue effect in here. Some original, just I guess, lamp black that really softened up. So it can give the illusion of some different colors. I think that you can then go further and do something almost, I can't think of his name. I'm sorry. And do heavy application as if we had some brush hanging in front of us. In fact, maybe we might take this painting one day and do that. On that note, I hope you enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, follow, and Happy New Year. Y'all take care.